Today, we will be discussing about the Naxalite movement in Telangana. The topic is rise and spread of Naxalite movement, the beginnings. In the first part means we will be having two parts, two basic sections. One is the beginnings and the other one is how the Naxalite movement is spread and how it is affecting the whole society, how it is interacting with the society and what are the consequences, what are the results, what changes the Naxalite movement has made in Telangana social structure. So, before that, we have to understand one broad general understanding that struggle is always waged by the people. In Indian history, we have different sort of struggles. Permanently, everlasting, ever-waging struggles are tribal struggles. We have a continuous history of tribal struggles from 1700s against the state, against the people who were usurping or curbing the rights of the tribals. So from 1700s means 18th century, you can see relentless fights of the tribals against the state. This is one sort of struggles. Their struggle is not based on any ideology, but it is for their rights. For the rights on the forest, rights of livelihood, against alienation by the state, outsiders. This is tribal struggles. Second one is the peasant struggles. Peasant struggles are the struggles which are against a particular economic system, that is the feudal system or the revenue system or the state, whatever is coming in the way of the peasantry, whatever system is forcing the peasantry to abdicate their rights or to lose their rights on the land or their labor. So that is peasant struggles. And come to the political form of struggles. In Indian history, we have different struggles. Indian independence movement, we call it as the struggle for independence, is a very prolonged struggle starting from 1860s. You have various phases, very cool phases, not so intense phases, and finally coming into 1900s, you have different bigger phase of Indian independence struggle till 1947. So, in terms of polity, Indian independence struggle is a longer waged struggle in Indian history. And next to this Indian independence struggle, you have another struggle, another movement, which we call as Naxalite movement. Naxalite movement, in government parlance, we call it as revolutionary extremism or red extremism. So all these things, Naxalites call themselves as revolutionaries. So left-wing extremism is another term, popular term, left-wing extremism. It has ideology. What ideology it has? That is left ideology, that is Marxism. We will talk about it in detail. But before that, this Naxalite movement is very important in the history, Indian history particularly, because it is 5-decade-old movement in India. Even today, you have the Naxalite movement in different parts of the country. And Naxalite movement was having its beginnings in Telangana too. Before Naxalite movement, we had a great struggle in Telangana itself, Telangana armed struggle waged by CPI against Nizam and feudalism. So, Telangana is not new for all these struggles. Why we are studying Naxalite movement in Telangana history? Because we are talking about the period, you can see from 1947 onwards, we are talking till the formation of Telangana state, 2014. Post 1947 developments and 2014, you have Naxalite movement very much entrenched in the society of Telangana. You have lot of events, happenings, people associated with it, and Telangana was completely having a bigger phase of Naxalite movement more than any other place in this country. That is the importance we are having. In the country, ours is the only state which held talks with the Naxalites to address the issues raised by the Naxalites. And to not the least, but to conclude about the importance, I would like to say all the ruling classes, all the political parties, whoever is going to the rural side of Telangana were talking about the Naxalism and saying that there won't be repression on the movement, or they are saying that the agenda of Naxalites is correct, but the path is wrong. N.T. Ramarao, who went to Telangana before getting elected, he said Naxalites are the only patriots. Are the only patriots, he was saying. So you can see whether many people like it or not, whether their path is constitutional or unconstitutional, Naxalism is there in the political agenda of India and Telangana too. That is why we are studying about the Naxalite movement in Telangana. Telangana, again going back to the roots, going back to the pre-1940s, Nizam state, a feudal state. In the feudal state, you have the landlords' suppression. Landlords are suppressing the peasantry in the countryside. Landlords are exploiting the peasantry, the entire society. In many ways, though they are having unconstitutional, they are not the kings, but they are in the second rung in the pyramid of the king. After Nizam, you have this landlord section. These people were exploiting the entire society, and Telangana could not overcome the exploitation unless and until there was a great struggle which is known as Telangana armed struggle. Telangana armed struggle happened between 1946 and 51, was the pioneer in the armed struggles in the country. Though apart from Telangana, there were struggles in 𝗵𝗵𝗀𝗃 in Bengal, Punaprah Vailar in Kerala. Those two struggles are not up to the level in which like Telangana armed struggle. So in this background, we are discussing the Naxalite movement. So, rise and spread of Naxalite movement and the beginnings. So in this, we will be talking about the conditions at the country level, that is national and international conditions, Naxalbari uprising and Indian context. Why the Naxalbari movement has to come in on Indian soil? Naxalbari comes to Telangana. From Naxalbari, a remote place in some other part of the country, we will be talking about it. Then anti-landlord struggles in Jagityala, Sircilla, North Telangana. Mass organizations, Raitu Kuli Sanghams, all these things were part and parcel of the Telangana society. So we will be talking about all these issues in this movement. Before going to that, I would like to make a political comment. For example, Naxalbari is a small village. But this Naxalbari and a struggle started in Naxalbari is not the beginning itself. There should be conditions for the rise of such movements on the soil, on the Indian soil. So what were the conditions? National conditions are the conditions present at that time. This is, we are talking of 60s of Indian context. 60s are known as simmering 60s, means udukutunna, kutakutaladtunna 60s. In 60s, there were many issues, burning issues, which were bothering the country, bothering India. Like, you had a great food crisis. Food grains, we did not have much. So that is why you can see, because of this food crisis, we had two things coming in the way. One is green revolution in the next phase. Second one is getting food grains from America or some other country to overcome such things. This is number one, food crisis, very big crisis in Indian history. Then, non-implementation of land reforms. This is 1960s. India got independence in 1947. Though we made tall promises, though there are many legislations about the rights of the tenants, about the rights of the workers, about the rights of the peasantry, land ceiling acts and all those things. Actually, land ceiling acts is not much relevant at this point of time, but still the feudalism is much stronger even after 2 decades of Indian independence. What was happening? Land is concentrated in some hands and majority of the people are working on the lands owned by a few. So automatically the people who are in the hands of those who are exploited in the hands of a few will revolt against it. So the question of land reforms is another important aspect. Next, unabated feudal oppression. Feudal oppression is not just economic, remember. In feudalism, for example, the landlord will be exploiting the peasant for want of his labor. Number one, The labor will be working in the fields. But apart from that, the entire family of the labor, agriculture labor or the bonded labor will be working in the house of the Dora or the landlord. Dora is a context we are talking because in Telangana, these landlords are called as Doras. So, Doras are landlords. These people were exploiting. In other sense too, this is known as extra economic coercion. Remember this word should be used at an appropriate place. Economic exploitation is one thing, extra economic coercion is another thing. This is another aspect of feudalism, extra economic coercion. Use this word in your examination. This extra economic coercion will be done in many ways. It can be expressed through bonded labor working other than your agricultural activities and caste oppression, or the entire village is subjugated to landlord. So all these things are coming in feudalism. Next, unemployment. Severe unemployment was there in the country. In spite of having 5-year plans, we were unable to provide employment for the newly educated. This country was growing younger and younger every day, and educated should get employment. And if you don't get employment, the crisis will snowball into the society and that unrest will lead to some other movement. That is why this unemployment is another important reason of this period. Next, political crisis inside Congress. 1960s in our country till 1975, after emergency, there was no bigger threat to Congress. Congress was monopolizing the politics of this country. So, Congress was the only party which was having its say in Indian politics. Inside Congress, after Nehru, Indira Gandhi came. The old guards are the people who were there in Congress, the seniors, versus Indira Gandhi. And that crisis was boiling, that crisis was brewing inside the Congress at this point of time. So, internal crisis in Congress is another symptom of this period. Last one, but not the least one. Debate among the communists in Indian Revolution. This is the most important aspect because whenever we talk about any aspect, philosophically we have to analyze two things. For change, there are two conditions. One is external, second is internal. Among these external and internal conditions, which is important? What is important? Which one is important? Internal condition is important. Unless and until there are internal conditions favorable for the change, external conditions cannot impose upon. So, internal condition, who has to wage a revolutionary struggle? The people who has to fight for it. The revolutionary party or a communist party or a political party which is talking of a change, which is talking about change. So, revolutionary party or communist party should have the debate inside how to proceed with the revolution, and it was there at this point of time. So, this is another important aspect of this period. So, these are the conditions at national level. Then come to the international conditions. International conditions were also severely ripe, and after Second World War, again in 60s, there was some situation, there was a serious unrest in Europe too, and France expressed it a lot. In France, there was a big French student protest that inspired the students of India too. The students of France were questioning the authorities, questioning the method they were being taught, questioning the society which is stagnant. They were very radical in their slogans. University of Sorbonne or Nantes, all these universities echoed the slogans of French students' protest. This is happening in 1960s, late 1960s. So, this is the situation in France, one example. Then, anti-imperialist sentiment, anti-imperialist feelings or struggles in the world. What anti-imperialist? It is against the American imperialism. Vietnam was attacked by America, and many people all over the world were protesting against the American intervention in Vietnam. American war on Vietnam. Vietnam is a small country, but America could not win. It retreated shamelessly, but it never accepted that I lost this battle. That is why Vietnam inspired many people in this period against the imperialism. So Vietnam became a symbol. That is why in Naxalite movement in 1970s, in Bengal, it was a slogan that Mera Naam, Tera Naam, Vietnam, Vietnam. You see, Vietnam becoming a symbol of anti-imperialist struggle. This is another international condition. Then cultural revolution of Mao has questioned the basic structures of the Communist Party itself. Mao said, bombard the headquarters. Mao said, you should question everything. You should question anything which is old. You can question anything which is redundant. You can question anything which is not useful for society. So all these things have come into the minds of the people, and cultural revolution and Chinese revolution both inspired the communists in India. So behind this background, this was the background for Naxalbari movement. And our Naxalbari movement is starting in one remote corner of the country. If you remember the map of India, when you enter into northeast, there is a small strip. It is like chicken snake. 𝗂𝗽𝗱𝗁𝗀 సన్నగుంటుంది. So that chicken snake, at that chicken snake, you have a place known as Siliguri district. In Siliguri district, near Siliguri, Darjeeling and Siliguri, these are the areas in and around that area. In that remote corner, you have a village which is known as Naxalbari. There our story begins. The Naxalite movement started in Naxalbari in 1967. 66, 67, these are the years, beginning years. For the next movement, which will be a bigger movement in the country, the beginnings happened in this village, Naxalbari. 𝗳 Majumdar was the leader. 𝗳 Majumdar originally a district committee member of CPM, but he was different. He was contesting the methods of CPM. He was for revolution. He wanted to change the landscape of rural areas against feudalism. So this man, 𝗳 Majumdar, wrote 8 documents. Documents means 8 essays on Indian condition. Present task is first document. What should we do to change the political situation is number 1. Then how to proceed with the revolution. What are the conditions? Who are the enemies? Who are the friends in the Indian society? All these things he was writing in all these 8 documents. Against revisionism means he was aiming at CPM or CPI, which promised revolution but did not work for revolution. So he was aiming at revisionism and he was trying to build a revolutionary party. All these things were written in these 8 documents. In your examination, they may ask 8 documents, author 𝗳 Majumdar. Remember, this is the basic document for CPI-ML or Naxalite movement. Then another important aspect is he was inspired by the Chinese model of revolution. In China, unlike in Russia it was a insurgency. It was insurrection, means you will raise against the state all of a sudden, and for 10 days or 15 days you will be waging the battle and win the power. But in China, it was a protracted one. It took many years, starting from 1925 to 1949, 24 years of long struggle, winning over smaller areas and encircling the towns and winning bigger areas, making guerrilla zones, and finally capturing the political power in the entire country. This was the model devised by Mao. This is known as protracted people's war. Another important principle he was talking about was new democratic revolution. In the countries where the bourgeoisie, like in Napoleon or in France, when bourgeoisie has overthrown feudalism, they came as new democratic people. But in countries like China or any other backward countries, bourgeoisie means the middle class or the industrial class did not rise because of colonial powers coming and sitting on the country itself. It was a colonial country. So you don't have the rise of bourgeoisie. There, the Communist Party itself has to bring revolution. The revolution which has to be brought by capitalists has to be brought by communists. So this is known as New Democratic Revolution. So this New Democratic Revolution and protracted people's war means it will take many years to continue revolution and capture the power. This was the policy. This was the method of China known as Chinese model. So 𝗳 Majumdar was propagating the Chinese model. He was convinced with this Chinese model and he feels that in India, Chinese model is the one which will work for the revolution. So now 𝗳 Majumdar along with 3 other people, Kanu Sanyal, Jangal Santhal. Kanu Sanyal is also a communist leader, CPM leader, and Jangal Santhal local party leader at that area, that is Naxalbari, that Siliguri district. So between March 67 and April, means these periods, they were intensely working among the peasantry. They made already the work, they were doing the work in the villages among the peasantry, Santhal tribals, mostly Santhal tribals, very backward area. And the land was in the hands of jotedars. People are the Santhal tribals who were being exploited by the jotedars, the landlords. So Naxalbari, Kharibadi, Phansi-Deva, these three villages were the main centers of the beginning of this activity. So between March and April 1967, almost 275 square miles of area was completely under the land struggles. The people were snatching away the land documents from the landlords and burning it so that they can get liberated. The same thing has happened in Telangana armed struggle too. When the Telangana armed struggle was waging battle against feudalism in Telangana, they also seized the promissory notes, mortgage papers, land documents and burnt it. Bonfire. In the bonfire, they celebrated their liberation. Like that. So, the land occupation happened in 60 places, led by the committees made by these leaders, known as peasant committees. Krishak Committee. Krishak Committee was the name. So, this Krishak Committee were organizing the peasantry and getting liberated from the yoke of the feudalism. This is happening in just a small area near Naxalbari. But what is happening in the nearby period, the peasantry were organized under Krishak committees and the land was being occupied. Then will the state keep quiet if the land is being occupied without the consent of the revenue department or state? No. First police came. On May 23rd, a police came, known as, his name was 𝗂𝗏𝗏𝗏, and 𝗂𝗏𝗏𝗏 was attacking the villagers, and villagers repulsed it. In that, 𝗂𝗏𝗏𝗏 died. Again on May 25th, what happened? Police came in a large number and fired upon the villagers. In this, 7 women and 3 children died. 7 women and 3 children died in the melee, in the firing, in the police firing, and as a result, the first martyrs of Naxalbari struggle were none other than women of that village and children, not even the communist leaders or the people. Actually, people were targeted by the police to terrorize the peasantry. So, if we go to Naxalbari region, we can see the martyrs memorial of these 7 women and 2 children. These were poor peasantry not having lands. So, they were killed by the police of West Bengal. Very interestingly, it was a coalition ministry of Bangla Congress and CPM. Hare Krishna Konar was the revenue minister from CPM, and Jyoti Basu was also there in the ministry. And Congress led by Ajay Ghosh was Bangla Congress. So CM, Bangla Congress, and it's a coalition ministry of CPM. And who is fighting against it? A CPM leader of the district. So this was the equation happening. So this movement, the firing and killing of the people, was a big blow to the local movement. Then Charu Majumdar said, now the liberation war has begun, because we have to spread this movement, raise the level of resistance, and now the movement has what you call spread to different areas of the state, in the rural areas. Not only rural areas, within no time it spread to many areas of the country. For example, you can take Srikakulam in AP. Srikakulam is far away from Bengal, but in Srikakulam, CPM cadres, district leaders rose against feudalism, rose against the non-tribals in the forest areas, rose against forest department officials and money lenders, and tribals were given support. And in Srikakulam, the Naxalite movement has taken up. Naxalbari movement started in Naxalbari, then spreading into Srikakulam. Since it has come from Naxalbari, everywhere it is being called as Naxalite movement. And next, this is Srikakulam. Apart from Srikakulam in Andhra Pradesh, Mushahari in Bihar, Birbhum in West Bengal, Lakhimpur-Kheri in Uttar Pradesh. Lakhimpur-Kheri is in the Tarai region of Uttar Pradesh, means Himalayan foothills, forest area, tribal, semi-rural, and feudalism is so deeply entrenched. So Lakhimpur-Kheri in UP, then Wayanad in Kerala, and Firozpur in Punjab. You can see different types of landscapes. tribal areas, rural areas and Punjab-like places. So all these areas were under fire. So Naxalbari movement spread to all these areas. That is why one poet said, Naxalbari is not a name of a village. Now it is the name of the country. So communist movement has again, communist movement means communist movement is movement. You have different communist parties. The Communist Party now waging is not a party. It is a small group of people came out of CPM or resisting the CPM, and these people started this movement. Let's take some small information about the communist movement. That is CPI started in Tashkent in 1920, but it did not function as a communist party. But in 1925, it started its work in India. And CPI then took part in many struggles, as I said, working class movement, peasant movement, and it raised Telangana armed struggle. That is a very important achievement of CPI in Indian history. But in 1964, CPI split into CPI, CPM. The main contradiction inside the CPI was, there were two discussions. One is whether India is right or wrong in the Indo-China war. Some people who supported the Chinese stance came into CPM. Those who supported India's stand settled in CPI. So this is one international thing. But the main important thing is, inside the CPI also there is a debate how to continue the revolution, how to capture the political power. Any communist party has an aim to capture political power, to establish a proletarian state. So you have communism in your party's name. So definitely always you will be having the debate inside the party. This debate also led to the division in CPI. So communist movement having this debate inside, but during all these debates, 𝗳𝗏 has started his movement in Srikakulam. He started his movement in Naxalbari. Then it spread to all over the country. So what is happening in this meantime? Supporters of Naxalbari struggle inside CPM, inside CPI, and outside these two parties, those who are independent, not part of communist movement, but inspired by the peasant struggles, revolutionary peasant struggles, were getting polarized under Naxalbari banner. So first they have started All India Coordination Committee of Revolutionaries. Then they changed the name to All India Coordination Committee for Communist Revolutionaries, to take some more people who are in revolutionary parties or communist parties. They have changed the name. So first 𝗂𝗍𝗺𝗺, then they started 𝗂𝗍𝗺𝗺, All India Coordination Committee for Communist Revolutionaries. Then finally, on 22nd April 1969, a new party was formed in Indian politics, that is known as CPIML. In communist parties, if you see, first one is CPI, then came CPM, or CPI in brackets M, means CPI Marxist. Now this is CPIML, Marxist Leninist. So what is the difference between Marxist Leninist? We'll be discussing. Because the people who are starting this CPIML were under the influence of Naxalbari movement, were led by 𝗳𝗏 and Saroj Datta, Sushital Rai Chaudhary, like many stalwarts who were in CPM. They were leaders, already established leaders in CPM. Saroj Datta was a great poet in Bengal, and he came out of CPM and supported Naxalbari. Many film actors like 𝗪𝗏, a character actor of Bengal of those times, came out of CPM. For some time he was with Naxalbari struggle. Like that, these people were... మరి చెప్పరు, మీరు లాస్ట్ 2 minutes చెప్పాలా? కాదు, చెప్తా. So their understanding was Marxism, Leninism and Mao thought. Now as I said, Chinese model was the model they are talking about. So this is the background of Naxalbari, organizationally and politically, ideologically. What happened outside Andhra Pradesh? I am saying Andhra Pradesh because Telangana and Andhra regions were together in united Andhra Pradesh in 1970s. Till 2014, our fate was together. So, in Andhra Pradesh, what was happening during this point of time? That is important. And before going to that, remember, whatever I am teaching today and in the next class also, you will not find in the books, either in Telugu Academy books and some other books. But these questions are important. The points are important in your bits. In many of the TSPSC exams, they have asked some of the bits which is outside these prescribed books. So I am trying to give you more number of points related to Naxalite movement, objective bits plus a conceptual aspect of Naxalite movement. So now coming back to our topic, that is Naxalite movement in Telangana. We are talking about Telangana's Naxalite movement, but before Telangana there was an area which is completely active and taken up the Naxalbari struggle in its region, that is Srikakulam armed struggle. Srikakulam armed struggle happened between 1967-1970, that is 3 years of period. Then it was inspired by Naxalbari, that is happening in Bengal. CPM leaders of the district came out of CPM and launched this struggle. And the struggle in the tribal areas, because tribal areas were the areas which were completely infested. I am using the word infested with the exploiters. Infested with the exploiters. Why infested I am saying means so many money lenders, outsiders and the forest department officials. All these people were exploiting the tribals. So tribals were the people who were the main victims. And CPM leaders of the district like 𝗹𝗶 Satyam, 𝗂𝗶 Kailasam, Subbarao Panigrahi, Panchadi Krishnamurti and Nirmala, all these people were locals and these people took up the struggle and great Srikakulam armed struggle happened. Srikakulam armed struggle has brought many questions to the fore. That is whether the people, the students, intellectuals, teachers, writers, are they on the side of the toilers or the oppressors? Are they on the side of the toilers or the oppressed or the oppressors? Piditula Pakshama, Pidinche Valla Pakshama. This was the question raised by Srikakulam movement that has inspired a generation of educated in Andhra Pradesh. Telugu speaking youth, students, teachers, intellectuals, lawyers, everyone was inspired by this movement, and that is helping the movement to come into Telangana. This is a direct link from Srikakulam to Telangana. It is not Srikakulam completely separate, because Srikakulam movement was completely suppressed by Jalagam Vengal Rao by 1970. But Srikakulam did not stop there. Srikakulam movement has its echo or its sound made in Telangana too. Because in all aspects of life in Andhra Pradesh, in Telugu cultural milieu, Naxalbari and Srikakulam reverberated. This is what we can see. So this Srikakulam struggle inspired, and at the same time, Naxalbari and Srikakulam, all these things, as I said, CPML party is formed, Charu Mazumdar as the general secretary of that party. He visited Srikakulam. He came to Andhra Pradesh along with Kanu Sanyal and communist leaders from Andhra Pradesh. Important people of Naxalite movement, remember these names. These can be asked. One is 𝗂𝗽𝗱 𝗬𝗏. 𝗂𝗽𝗱 𝗬𝗏 was in CPI, and he was in CPI during the Telangana armed struggle, Krishna district secretary, but later became inactive in CPI because of various reasons. He was not actively taking part in CPI or CPM activities, but he settled down in Warangal and doing farming. And when the Naxalbari call came, he again took up the political activity and rose into action. 𝗂𝗽 Satyamurthy, another communist leader, was from Krishna district, and he was also one of the pioneer in Naxalbari movement in Andhra Pradesh. Then the third one, S.M. Rawouf of Anantapur, same CPM leader, took the call of Naxalbari and coming into this activity. Another person, 𝗹𝗶 a person who participated in Telangana armed struggle directly, a native of Nalgonda, was active, and 𝗹𝗶, popularly known as DV, was also there in Naxalbari raised struggle or struggles inspired by Naxalbari. T. Nagireddy, Tarimela Nagireddy from Anantapur. T. Nagireddy was an MLC too, and T. Nagireddy from CPI, CPM, and Tarimela Nagireddy wrote a book, 𝗪𝗏 𝗺𝗺𝗃. This was asked in one of the TSPSC examination, 𝗪𝗏 𝗺𝗺𝗃. India Mortgaged, the book written by Tarimela Nagireddy, was also one of the Naxalite leader of this period. Then Chandra Pullareddy, again a person inspired by Telangana struggle and continuing into the struggle. So all these names are in Naxalite movement in Andhra Pradesh. So what is happening here? Communists from Andhra Pradesh are in touch with the communists of Bengal or Naxalbari. Communist means it is CPI-ML here, not CPM or CPI. So they were together, and 𝗧 𝗦𝗔𝗧 came to Andhra Pradesh. He visited Srikakulam also. He came to 𝗂𝗽𝗱𝗁𝗺. There they had a meeting. This 𝗂𝗽𝗱𝗁𝗺 is in Guntur district, in Palnadu region, where a martyrs memorial was built in the latter part of time also, when Naxalites came for talks from Nallamala forest into Hyderabad. There was the first meeting was held at 𝗂𝗽𝗱𝗁𝗺. Remember this word, this place? You might be asked. The first meeting immediately when the Naxalites came out of forest, there was a first meeting, public meeting, 2004, 𝗂𝗽𝗱𝗁𝗺, and the martyrs column was built in memory of these people. So, communists who are supporting Naxalbari were two streams. One stream is Kondapalli Sitaramaya, Satyamurthy, Rauf, and many others like these people. They were totally supporting 𝗧 𝗦𝗔𝗧. And the other stream, that is, they were differing with 𝗧 𝗦𝗔𝗧 at many points. Like 𝗧 𝗦𝗧 was for annihilation, means completely you should kill the class enemy. Unless and until you kill the class enemy, you cannot succeed. So they were opposing it. Though 𝗧 𝗦𝗧 denied that he is not for just annihilation, he was for political activity in the latter phase also. But the main aspect or the main criticism on 𝗧 𝗦𝗧 was annihilation. So, against mass organizations, 𝗧 𝗦𝗧 did not advocate building mass organizations for revolution, because before Naxalbari, CPI or CPM had many mass organizations. The criticism on these parties by the Naxalbari people were, these people start mass organizations and don't do revolution. So against this trend, they were not starting mass organizations except the peasant committees. So no mass organization and Khatam, such differences are there. And slogans like Chairman Mao is our chairman, means China's chairman is our chairman. Chinese path is our path is one slogan. Once you enter into next phase, along with your Chinese path is our path, the slogan of these times was China's chairman is our chairman, means Mao is our chairman. So this is also not palatable for many people, and these differences kept them aloof from CPI-ML. So these people started 𝗵𝗃𝗃, Tarimela Nagireddy, 𝗹𝗶𝗀𝗃𝗁𝗺, Chandrapullareddy, 𝗂𝗽𝗱𝗁𝗺, all these people differed, and they are in different stream. That is why we can see in Naxalite movement in Telangana or Andhra Pradesh, we have two streams. One stream is People's War stream. Kondapalli Sitaramaya, 𝗂𝗽𝗱 Satyamurthy, Rauf, all these people started. That stream became People's War, CPI-ML People's War in 1980. In 1980, they renamed the party CPI-ML People's War. The other stream is led by Tarimela Nagireddy, 𝗃𝗵𝗱𝗁𝗺, Chandrapullareddy, 𝗹𝗶𝗀𝗃𝗁𝗺. So popularly known as TNDVCP. There it is KSSM, Kondapalli Sitaramaya, Satyamurthy. So these two streams were completely into different orientation. One is completely supporting CPI-ML, the other is not supporting CPI-ML. So as a result, what has happened? The two paths are being propagated, implemented in Andhra Pradesh. We will see how it is manifesting in the next part of our lesson. But now, first let's look into the impact of Naxalbari on Telangana. Because we talked about Naxalbari, it spread, but the Naxalbari's impact on Telangana. Why Naxalbari is appealing to Telangana? 1969, Telangana was into agitational mode. Students, youth and intellectuals were fighting for separate Telangana, and it went into setback. Once any movement which was so militant, fighting for a great task, great right, is into setback, the desperation, the agony, the pain will be translated into something else. Sometimes it goes into negative aspect also, but this time it took shelter, that feelings, and the people who were in Telangana movement, 1969 movement, immediately jumped into Naxalite movement. Very interestingly, in 1969 itself, in May itself, 𝗳𝗏𝗃 was warning the government, saying that if you don't resolve the issue of Telangana, they may go to Naxalism. They may join Naxalite parties. 𝗳𝗏𝗃 was warning because he's a political leader. He knows the dimensions, the dynamics of the people's agitations. So now, what has happened? The Telangana movement set back, and it is one of the important source of the youth and students, intellectuals to join into Naxalite movement of 1970s. And both CPI-ML fraction and 𝗵𝗵𝗃 both started working in Telangana. So as a result, you have different areas gradually spreading the Naxalite impact or Naxalite politics and growing of movements under the leadership of Naxalite organizations. And the objective conditions in Telangana, the feudalism still strong, going strong. What has happened in 1946-51? We had Telangana armed struggle. Really, Telangana armed struggle has addressed a big issue, that is feudalism. 10 lakh acres were liberated, 3,000 villages were liberated, lot of landlords were chased out, driven out of the village. But do you think it is completely a successful revolution or a successful anti-feudal struggle? No. What has happened? The same feudal lords or the landlords who went out of the village when the heat was there in the village, means the movement was at its peak, came back into the village with a bang under the new dress code. You can see this, a metaphorical expression, very symbolic expression in Mabhumi film. These people came back as the leaders of Congress. So the same landlord who was under Nizam is coming as a political leader into the village. So where is the feudalism? Is it gone or still there? So feudalism was still there. Even in 70s, we can see the intensity of the oppression, feudal oppression in Telangana villages. Doras were there. Economic oppression was there. Social oppression was there. Caste oppression was there. Women were oppressed, raped. And one of the tragic incidents we talk about, even Bathukammas, Naxalite movement has brought one case, one incident in Karimnagar district in one gadi. Dora was ordering the Dalit women to play Bathukamma, to perform Bathukamma dance naked in his gadi. Do you see the oppression of the Dora in gadi in 1970s? So intense. So naturally, this is the ground on which the Naxalite movement will start, will begin. And the target is feudalism. So this is the objective condition in Telangana. And tribals, come to tribals. Tribals are completely alienated. Despite of having so many tribal laws, their land is alienated. Outsiders, non-tribals occupied the lands. There is no organization or a support to raise their voice. Sometimes Ramji Gond will come in 1860s or Komaram Bhim will come. But where is the party in support of the tribals? So Naxalites addressed this problem. That is why Naxalism had a greater impact in tribal areas too in Telangana. Lastly, the students, youth, intellectuals, they are not into class struggles. They are not the peasantry to get completely exploited directly. But these people were inspired by the intellectualism of the Marxism, Leninism or Mao Zedong thought. These people were inspired by the struggles waged by the people who were completely oppressed. And they were standing in support of these oppressed masses, and these people were in support, and they are writing poetry, they are coming into organizations, they are going to villages, getting declassified. Means declass means you should come out of your class nature. Go and join with the peasantry who are toiling, who are sufferers in the village. So they are getting declassed, they are going to the villages. So student, youth and intellectuals are the biggest source to spread Naxalite movement in this period. We will see how this has happened. Then, coming to the mass organizations, though the movement, the topic says spread and rise of Naxalite movement, they are not describing in detail. But without understanding the mass organizations, without understanding the role of different sections in Telangana society, you can't understand why this Naxalite movement has grown to such an extent. So, Naxalite movement has a bigger source in student movement. Inspired by Naxalbari movement, students who were in student federation came out of it and started Progressive Democratic Students, PDS. And George Reddy was the leading light of 1970s. Even today, the revolutionary student movement, the left student movement, which are aligned to Naxalite politics, take George Reddy as their inspiring leader. George Reddy, though he lived for a short while, a student of Osmania University, George Reddy was a brilliant scholar, and he was in PDS, that is Progressive Democratic Students, and in 1972 April he was murdered by ABVP and some of the goons. So what has happened? Already in Osmania University or any other political, we can see the contradictions between the student organizations. Since he is ultra-left organization, the contradiction with other organizations we can see. So George Reddy was killed near in Osmania University campus itself, and his martyrdom inspired many people. George Reddy was a dreamer. Like 𝗂𝗽𝗻𝗀, George Reddy, what he did, very interestingly, 𝗂𝗽𝗻𝗀 life, if you see, 𝗂𝗽𝗻𝗀 toured Latin America on motorcycle to study the conditions of Latin America, and he has written Motorcycle Diaries. And he, in those lines, George Reddy was trying to see the Telangana villages on bicycle, and he toured some of the villages and got inspired. Though he was a budding revolutionary, a few years he lived his life as a revolutionary, but he inspired the student movement at that point of time. So PDS or Progressive Democratic Students came out of SF, and these people were supporting Naxalbari politics. And inside this PDS also there are two streams. One stream is saying that we should propagate Naxalbari politics openly to the peasantry, to the people, and we should openly say. And one stream says, no, we need not say, we'll stick to the student issues and we'll do it wherever it is useful, not here. Then those who want to propagate Naxalbari politics openly came out of PDS and started Radical Students Union. And this Radical Students Union in 1974 became a powerful organization to spread Naxalbari politics in Telangana. They have started Go to Village campaign. For example, you can see one performance, one act will change the entire scenario. Go to Village campaign was a campaign by RSU in a very big way. Every year, hundreds of students were sent to villages. Though the students are from villages, again they are going back to villages. They came to city as students, but going back to villages as revolutionaries, as revolutionary students. Going back to villages, not to their own villages, some packets they will be selecting, and this team, 5, 10, 15, this team will go to the villages, know the problems of the people and understand it, start organizations. Like if the problem is about the bonded labor or wages, they will start peasant organization. Like that, student organization became a big instrument in organizing the peasantry or the people in the rural areas when they started this Go to Village campaign. This was asked in one of the TSPSC examination, remember. So Go to Village campaign is one of the bigger campaign by students. So students, as I said, organizing the peasantry. And when they are going into villages, Naxalbari politics is not part-time politics. What is happening? The students who got inspired by Naxalbari politics are some of the students will be leaving their studies and going permanently to the village to organize the peasantry, to organize the oppressed. So what they were doing, for example, in 1975, after this Go to Village campaign started, students were sent to villages so that they will go settle. They will not be given any money. Just they have to go like this with one bag, with some books and minimum clothes. No money, nothing. You have to depend on the people, win the confidence of the people, win the confidence of the oppressed, be part of them. This was the teachings of the leadership. So students went and trying to settle in the rural areas. And 1975, a major incident has happened in the history of revolutionary student movement or Naxalbari movement or civil rights movement, we can say. 1975, emergency declared. On 24th July, 4 students who went to Giraipalli region, who went to this Medak district, forestry region, and they were captured. 4 students, one was Surapaneni Janardhan, Murali Mohan Reddy, Sudhakar, Anand Rao, all were the students from Warangal. Surapaneni Janardhan was a student of Regional Engineering College known as REC. In those days, in the beginning, when the students were getting organized under Naxalbari politics, REC was known as Radical Engineering College instead of Regional Engineering College, REC. Surapaneni Janardhan was one of the first generation REC students who got inspired by Naxalbari politics and went to villages. And these 4 people were captured, arrested by the police, and they were taken into the forest at 𝗂𝗽𝗱𝗁 and they were shot dead, point blank range. And they claimed that that was an encounter. And on this, see, encounter means actually both the parties should have weapons in their hands and fight upon each other. And in that someone will die, may die, will die or may die. But here, civil liberties organizations or human rights organizations are calling these are fake encounters because they have been captured and they were tied to, and then they were shot dead. That is illegal, unconstitutional. This is known as extrajudicial or extra-constitutional. You can't kill the people by after tying. If it is an encounter, that can be. Even Supreme Court has given guidelines about these things. Nowadays, the guidelines is any encounter, though it is a genuine encounter, first FIR should be filed. This is after a serious struggle by the civil liberties organizations. So, this is a question of human rights. So, these 4 students were killed, and on this, after emergency in 1977, April, a committee was constituted, 𝗬𝗏 Committee. This 𝗬𝗏 Committee, Justice 𝗬𝗏, in this committee there were many important people like Nabhakrishna, one ex-CM of Odisha, and important literary personalities and journalists, some political people, everyone part of Kannabiran, all these people were part of this 𝗬𝗏 Committee. 𝗬𝗏 Committee gave a preliminary report saying that this is a fake encounter. Why I am talking about 𝗂𝗽𝗱𝗁 encounter first? Because 1977, this is one of the political activity immediately happening after emergency. So this political activity is none other than Naxalbari politics getting entrenched into the soil of Telangana and getting shot dead, and you are talking about the rights of the people who got killed in this by the state. So 𝗬𝗏 Committee gave its report. Based on this, again the government has to appoint a commission known as Bhargava Commission to look into the aspects of all the fake encounters or killings happening during emergency period in Andhra Pradesh. This is another committee. In the list of committees, you may get such questions: 𝗬𝗏 Committee, Bhargava Commission, Justice Bhargava Commission. This Bhargava Commission was appointed by the government. 𝗬𝗏 Committee is a civil initiative that was initiated by the people of different walks, from the different walks of life. That is non-governmental. But this Bhargava Commission is a government commission appointed by the government to look into the encounters in Andhra Pradesh. July 1977 it was appointed, and this Bhargava Commission has clearly come out with evidences that this should be a fake encounter. 𝗂𝗽𝗱𝗁 was a fake encounter. But very interestingly, as we see in the history, all the reports which are against the armed forces or uniformed forces will be suppressed. The only pretext is that will demoralize the force. Jalagam Vengal Rao opposed this, and finally because of the lobbying, because of the pressure they have mounted, this Bhargava Commission could not come out with the full report, and that is half thing. So as a result, what we see here, Bhargava Commission unfulfilled. But the moral victory is for the people who were accusing the state that this is a fake encounter. So 𝗂𝗽𝗱𝗁 encounter is one of its kind, first one in a big way. 4 students got killed. This is related to our student movement. Student movement, RSU, PDSU. These 2 names you should remember. RSU is representing the politics of CPML People's War. PDSU is representing the politics of APCCCR people like Tarimela Nagareddy, DV and Chandrapula Reddy. So even today you have the different student organizations. PDSU is there, but RSU is banned. So you don't find RSU today, but PDSU is still there working in institutions, education institutions. So this is about student movement. Another important movement is revolutionary writers movement. Revolutionary writers got inspired by Naxalbari movement. Really interesting aspect is students drove them to take side of the Naxalbari path. Rachayitalara meeretu vaipu, Peeditula vaipa, Peedakula vaipa. On whose side you are was the pamphlet released by Vishaka students when Naxalbari movement was at its peak. So literary personalities, writers has to take stand. in support of Naxalbari movement. 𝗧𝗧, a stalwart of stalwart of Telugu literature. Till then, he was in 𝗹𝗵𝗻𝗁 𝗧𝗏, Progressive Writers Association, has to take side. And 𝗧𝗧, Ravi Shastri, Rachakonda Vishwanath Shastri, like stalwarts, these were names established, well-established names in Telugu literature by this time. These people came out and formed Virasam. Virasam started in 1970, 4th July, coinciding with the martyrdom of Doddi Komurayya in 1940s. That is, Telangana armed struggle, Doddi Komurayya martyrdom is 4th July. Again, 4th July is Virasam formation day. Virasam had different people coming into 𝗹𝗶. Virasam is 𝗹𝗶 𝗪𝗧. In English, we call it as Revolutionary Writers Association, RWA. In Telugu, short form, that is Virasam. So, Virasam came in 1970, 4th July. And another organization is Janasahiti. In Virasam, Digambara Kavulu, like Cherabandarazu, Nagnamuni, Jwalamukhi, Bhairavayya, Nikhileshwar. These 5 were under the group of Digambara Kavulu. They came out of this Digambara Kavitva movement and they were part of revolutionary movement. Cherabandarazu became a stalwart in Revolutionary Writers Association, Virasam. He has written fantastic poetry in support of the toiling masses. And Varavarrao, part of this Tiragabudu Kaulu of this. This is, I said, simmering 60s. Simmering 60s expressed in different ways. All the aspects like the movement, the people, dissent was expressed in poetry, political movement. So there were many groups. Tiragabudu Kaulu, March Kaulu, all these organizations were there. So Varavarrao was a budding poet in 60s and he became part of Revolutionary Writers Association. 𝗧𝗧, Ravi Shastri, Cherabandarazu, Varavarrao, KVR, Koku, all these people were part of 𝗂𝗽𝗱𝗁𝗂 all these people were part of M.T. Khan from Hyderabad. All these people were founding members of 𝗹𝗶 𝗪𝗧, which supported Naxalbari movement. Lastly, the cultural movement, we know Jananatya Mandali, Gaddar and Arunodaya. These are the pioneer organizations for revolutionary cultural movement. Started as archivers in 1970, started by B. Narasimha Rao and Gaddar as a cultural organization, gradually transformed into Jananatya Mandali. Gaddar, Sanjeev, Divakar, all these names are associated with Jananatya Mandali. It was a popular organization with so many cultural forms. Songs came out during this Naxalbari movement. And it was a very interesting phenomena that they have sold at least lakhs of songs books and it became a popular organization. Even today, the forms, the costumes Telangana artists wear was initiated by Jananatya Mandali. So, this is about Jananatya Mandali, which was serving to spread the politics of Naxalbari. Same thing with Arunodaya Sanskritika Samakhya, Vimalakka, who took part in Telangana movement in the last phase 2. So these people were spreading the Naxalbari politics or Naxalite movement's ideology in the society. To conclude, what do we conclude today? That is, objective conditions were ripe for Naxalite movement in the country in 60s and in Telangana too. So this has made us to accept a new type of politics. Different sections became part of the Naxalite movement and uprising. And finally, the setback of Naxalbari and leaders of Andhra Pradesh organized after the setback in Naxalbari. What is happening? In Telangana, leaders are again organizing from lower level and building up a new movement. This is what has happened. And lastly, not just the peasant movement, but the mass organization played an important role in spreading the Naxalite movement in Telangana. In the next topic, we will be seeing how the Naxalite movement has spread in the villages and revolutionary peasant struggles are occurring in Telangana.
హాయ్ ఎవ్రీవన్, ఈరోజు మనం కాలము మరియు దూరం టైమ్ అండ్ డిస్టెన్స్లో సెకండ్ పార్ట్ చూద్దాం. సో ఈ సెకండ్ పార్ట్లో ఏంటంటే మనం సరాసరి వేగంల గురించి క్వశ్చన్స్, అదేవిధంగా ఈ ట్రైన్స్ సేమ్ డైరెక్షన్ ఆపోజిట్ డైరెక్షన్ క్వశ్చన్స్, అదేవిధంగా ట్రైన్ క్రాసింగ్ ఎ బ్రిడ్జ్ ఆర్ ట్రైన్ క్రాసింగ్ ఎ ప్లాట్ఫామ్ ఆర్ ట్రైన్ క్రాసింగ్ ఎ మ్యాన్. సో అట్లా మనకి డిఫరెంట్ కేసెస్ ఉన్నాయి. సో ఆ కేసులన్నీ మనం ఇప్పుడు డిస్కస్ చేద్దాం. సో ఫస్ట్ మనం సరాసరి వేగం ఆర్ సగటు వేగం అనేది ఏందనేది చూద్దాం. సో మనం సరాసరి వేగం ఆర్ సగటు వేగం అంటే ఏంటంటే, సో జస్ట్ ఇన్ కేస్ ఎప్పుడైనా చూసినప్పుడు, సో సరాసరి వేగంకి జనరల్గా ఫార్ములా ఏముంటుందంటే, ప్రయాణించిన మొత్తం దూరము బై కాలము ఆర్ ప్రయాణానికి పట్టిన కాలం అని రాయొచ్చు. సో మనకు సరాసరి వేగం ఎప్పుడు చూసుకున్నా కానీ ఇట్స్ గివెన్ బై ప్రయాణించిన మొత్తం దూరము బై ప్రయాణానికి పట్టిన కాలం. అంటే ఇంగ్లీష్లో ఇఫ్ యు ఆర్ రైటింగ్ దెన్ యావరేజ్ స్పీడ్, సరాసరి వేగం ఆర్ సగటు వేగం అని కూడా అంటారు, అది కూడా సేమ్. సో యావరేజ్ స్పీడ్ ఈజ్ ఈక్వల్ టు టోటల్ డిస్టెన్స్ ట్రావెల్డ్ బై టోటల్ టైం టేకన్. సో ఇది బేసిక్ ఫార్ములా. సో దీనిలో ఏంటంటే మనకు డిఫరెంట్ కేసెస్ ఉంటాయి. సో మనం ఏంటంటే